Hey, welcome to Wonderful Wednesday, Captive Audience. And Don, this is January 31st. We have got
Wow.
January done.
1/12 of the year is gone. Can you believe it?
It is. And, if you're like me, time is flying by like way too fast.
Yeah, it is an accelerator. That is for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, let's just dive right in. I found this story in the Epic Times, and I thought we should talk about it to help bring a little bit of awareness to our audience, just sharing maybe some different thoughts, I think, but sharing what's going on if you're not paying attention to the global picture, right? We have a national picture, we have a state picture, and a national picture, and the global picture. This article from the Epic Times says that the Davos elite see potential return of Trump as threat to global order. And as I was saw that headline, I go, talk about, you think that there's only national pressure on Trump? No, there's world pressure on Trump. There will go to any length not to have him be president. And so the former president's record breaking Iowa victory during the Global Davos Summit raised fears among global leaders, particularly in Europe. So much so that he was the talk of the town during the World Economic Forum that was in Davos in the Alpine ski village in Switzerland. And according to some observers, the question of his potential return to the White House dominated conversations everywhere throughout the summit, overshadowing even the most pressing global issues. So who attends that? It's global elites, think money, CEOs, bankers, policymakers, but it doesn't talk about, what's a global elite? Let's see, you say Bill Gates, right?
Mhm.
Those, the wealthiest of the wealthy.
Yeah, it's
Now, it doesn't say the elected people. It says CEOs, bankers, policymakers. Maybe the policymakers are those that have been elected. But they met January 15 to 19. So the European Central Bank President, Christine Lagarde, was openly critical of the former president. And she says, "We are all concerned about it because the United States is the largest economy, the largest defense country in the world, and has been a beacon of democracy with all its upside and downside." She said when asked about the upcoming U.S. election during an interview with Bloomberg on January 17th, end quote. "We have to be extremely attentive," she said. And she described President Trump as a clear threat to Europe during a recent interview with France 2 because of his stance on tariffs, NATO, and climate change.
So this is the one world crowd, though. I mean, they're speaking. The real threat is the threat that Trump is to them and their power base. I mean, think about where these people are speaking from. It's not about. She actually had the audacity to use the word democracy. Democracy implies the will of the people, the will of the American people. They could give uh, a rat's patootie about what the will of the American people might be. If the will of the American people is that Trump be elected president, then that's the will. That's the expression of the will of the American people. Just like it'd be the will of the French people, the British people, the Canadian people, those of the Netherlands, but they hate all of them too. And what's interesting about all of this is that there's a huge move towards conservatism in all of these Western countries. And the Davos crowd hates that because the one thing they clearly want is centralized government, one party government. In fact, one world government where they call the shots and the citizens just sit down and take it. That's what they're about. And Trump is the single biggest threat to that. There's other threats, but obviously the American economy being something, what, 33% of the entire world's economy, this would be the biggest one to take down if they could get it. That's the fear.
Well, that's exactly right. And so to he was about making America first. You know, it's kind of like you put your own mask on and then you help someone else. And we in America, quite frankly, have got to put our own mask on and help our country be better. And with everything that Biden has done, he's just ripping our nation apart. I mean, anyway, to stay on this article, Trump was a huge nationalist movement. And of course, the Democrats used that term like it was a bad thing. You know what? Every nation should be looking out there to their own self interest first. And then, yeah, it's okay to help some others, but we need to look after our own first. We do all share this beautiful blue planet. And it's a shame the warring that's going on, but this World Economic Forum is about control and a one world order.
They're communists, they're Marxists, and they want control of the whole kit and caboodle. And whatever they touch turns to you know what. In the words of the what's the name of the Argentinian president? Everything they
Malay,
touch,
yeah,
yeah, everything they touch turns to shit, which is true. So they
right.
want to employ the same strategies that they've employed in the old Soviet Union, in Romania, in Cuba, in every country they've touched, which resulted in the loss of millions of lives. That now they want to employ that whole strategy over the entire globe because, of course, they're smarter than Stalin was, and they're smarter than Ceausescu, and they're smarter than Castro. We could do it better. They're smarter than Mao, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what they want. And Trump, again, is the biggest threat to that. And really, we keep saying Trump, but Trump is just a reflection of us. It's us they hate. He's just the locus of it right now.
Yeah, and he with the president, you also have the purse strings. He goes, you know what, we're just cutting funding, or NATO, you guys have to pay your fair share now, which was like, hello, you mean they haven't been? He You realize Trump woke us up to so many things, right? He just spoke the truth. So in this article, which I encourage everybody to read because it just goes person after person after person, the former Belgian Prime Minister, and he's a current member of the European Parliament, voiced similar concerns. And Richard Dearlove, former head of UK Secret Intelligence Service, said that the re-election of President Trump could present a political threat to the UK and NATO. No, we don't threaten UK. NATO, maybe, right? But no. So there's a lot of fear mongering here. But he said that you have to add a political threat, which I'm worried about. This is what this guy said. Because if Trump, as it were, acts hastily and damages the Atlantic Alliance, that's a big deal for the UK. Well, frankly, I see more countries of the European Union, if they decide to just look after themselves, the European Union would break up,
Well,
much
you look at
like
yeah that
Brexit.
that whole that whole comment about Trump and NATO presupposes that what NATO's been doing for the last 10 years has been good. What has NATO done in the last 4 or 5 years but create a situation where we have a major war going on now because they keep inviting people into NATO that have no business being in NATO. They're making an aggressive stance toward the Soviet Union
Yeah.
or Russia, I should say, and that's why we have these wars. So NATO, when used the right way, has been a sensational, uh, stand. We shouldn't be paying that much for it. Having said that, though, it's kept us out of war for major war anyway for the last 40 years until now.
Yeah.
Until now,
Right.
Be- because they're walking away from the way NATO was structured for the last 70 years.
Yes. And so I'll tell you, but this whole article isn't all about bashing Trump. Brian Sachek, a former strategist and former Trump campaign staff member, said he believes the statements made by global elites at the Davos meeting could benefit the former president's campaign. Like it or not, they're not fans of Trump. They never have been, they never will be. And people talking about climate change and preaching their worldview of climate change while taking private planes to an exclusive European city is not really what key swing voters in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Arizona are particularly focused on these days. And that's very true. But I wanted to just bring this up because of the weight. There is much more on Trump's shoulder and pressure all around the world to try to take him down. Something that I, so that's pretty much something I will say. Jamie Dimon praises Trump during a rather unexpected moment in Davos. He is the CEO of JP Morgan, stirred the pot by giving a nod to former President Trump's policies and urging Democrats to reconsider their approach to MAGA Republicans. Because, quite frankly, you cannot, and this is me talking, you can't argue with the policies of President Trump. You can say whatever you want about his personality, but you cannot argue with the policies and what he did for America.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I've sold a lot of things in my career. And when I'm selling against a competitor, one thing that I have never seen done successfully is to call the customers that I want to get from that competitor stupid. Um,
Right?
it is like the most insane thing you've ever seen to call half the American population stupid. Or what did Hillary say? Misogynistic, racist,
Deplorable.
xenophobic, deplorable. I mean, it's incredible. You're going to
Yeah.
call the people you're trying to persuade to vote for you all of those names and expect to win? That's insane. I think it's all this person is saying. I'm not saying she's necessarily for the conservative point of view, but if you
Mhm.
think strictly in terms of if you're trying to sell something, or if you're trying, in this case, you're trying to sell an idea, if you're trying to win an election, you certainly can't win by calling the customers you're trying to acquire like a bunch of names. And that's precisely what they've been doing. It's just insane. And when you stop and look at this too, if Trump wins, this will have to be the most incredible thing that I've ever seen in my lifetime. That you could have every stronghold in society. You talk about Hollywood elite, you talk about the sports elite, you talk about the major corporations, all the news networks, all of the
Yeah.
universities, every single loudspeaker in the country is so over the top biased against him, and yet he's winning anyway.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
tells you that your side must be way the heck out of touch. Um,
Well, they are. Look at what's going on in America and around the world.
mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
disaster. It's a disaster on every level. Now, something else that this Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, said, he says, take a step back and be honest. He was kind of right, meaning Trump, about NATO and kind of right on immigration. He grew the economy quite well. Trade and tax reform worked. He was right about some of China. He wasn't wrong about some of these critical issues, and that's why they voted for him. But then he goes on to say, you know what? You need to help Nikki Haley support and have the Democrats, he encouraged the Democrats to support Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. Even if you took away the fact that I think she's a flip flopper and that she's weak and that she's the classic rhino. Let's
Yes.
let's take all that out of the equation. Why would you support the person? You want to support the person who's already had the experience, was highly successful in that experience,
Yeah.
and there's at least two people ahead of her when you check both of those boxes and you include DeSantis,
Mhm.
right? There's at least two people minimum who would you'd far more likely vote for if you were just looking at this just from a not just experience. Not all experience is great experience. I mean successful experience. I'll put it that way. Conservative bona fides. she's not even in the top three
No,
of,
no.
of high profile candidates. There's sure there's others too, but just the ones that actually ran. She's not even in the she's not even in the race. I don't say you could credibly think this, and it's reflected. The electorate reflects that.
Yeah, definitely. So, they in the end they said, you know what, he's going to win the election, and his policies aren't all wrong. So it's his accomplishments and what he got done are were just
And,
awesome for
and here's the
America.
thing about this. What's cool about this time, you can it's not theoretical. Well, none of this stuff is theoretical. If you
Right.
take the police out of neighborhoods, we know what's going to happen. I mean, we know these things, right? If you show weakness, then enemies are going to start misbehaving. We see that overseas all the time, right? These things are known fact. But the thing that makes this unique is you had those people, I'll call them the thinking class,
Hmm.
who voted for Trump the first time around because we know these ideas are going to work, right?
Yeah.
But you have those people who just can't seem to think. They have to get punished by these policies first. And now we have those people who are going to come over to this side. So these are the people who were previous Democrat voters, or I'm not going to vote for Trump because I don't like his personality, kind of voters, who now have migrants in their neighborhood, migrants in their schools, police being removed from the neighborhood, so crime is through the roof. Grocery stores closing down because the companies can't make any money, so the Walmarts are out of the neighborhood. Now you got a grocery desert because you can't buy any food anywhere. Inflation gone through the roof. Military getting shot up overseas. It's just you know what's happened. You have a total comparison. This is what it was like before. This is what it's like now. Do I want more of the same, or do I want to change it? Any
I want more of
rational,
what we had, man.
yeah, rational people are saying, I don't want no more of that. You don't have to be a
Right.
thinking person
I don't
to
want any
know.
more of what we got right now.
I don't want any more of that. And you know, and this is a
Yeah.
spite of they're being lied to, and they're coming to this conclusion on their own. I can't send my kid to school because it might get chopped up without my permission. Right? I know we'll talk about that in a minute too. But
Yes.
on every front, the insane people have taken over, and that party supports it, and that party's leadership supports it.
Yeah.
Um, People see it.
So talking about the lies, I'm posting another story here from Epic Times, and you may have heard that there's a lot of pushback on climate change. Well, this is a story out of Epic Times, and the headline is Trillions Spent on Climate Change Based on Faulty Temperature Data, the climate experts are saying. And so get this, meteorologist finds 96% of NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic Agency, Atmospheric Agency,
Mhm.
National Oceanographic Atmospheric Agency. So that agency, their temperature stations located in urban heat islands, including next to exhaust fans and on blistering hot rooftops.
Yeah, it's
I have never believed this climate BS, global warming, climate BS. I've never, ever, ever believed it.
you got two hurdles. Number one, because they're lying lefties, right? So for me, there's two hurdles. Number one, is it really changing? I don't know if I believe that because they lie so much. And number two, let me accept that one. You haven't convinced me that man is causing it. I mean, you got two gigantic hurdles, and then there's one final one. And if the first two are true, then it makes sense to spend energy on the places that are causing the most damage. And what are those places? Well, they're China and the Soviet and Russia, right? You would not do that here or in the West.
Yeah.
So clearly, this whole thing is being used as a tool to to uh, to eliminate to minimize the economies of the West and to have an excuse to enslave the population. The one thing that communists hate is the ability for citizens to physically move around. Because if you can physically move around, that means ideas can physically move around. They don't want that. I remember one of the things that used to shock me so much when I was a kid was to read about the Soviet Union and how you couldn't drive from one place to the other without getting somebody's permission. Well, why? Because you might talk to somebody, and they don't want that.
No,
Electronics, yeah, they can listen in on that, right? But you physically going face to face for the time being, they can't control that. They don't want that. They don't want ideas to move around. They want 100% control over you. And that is what this climate stuff is all about at the end of the day. It's just pure Marxism.
it is. And, then you have that's exactly what it is. And it has enriched China and many nations, actually, on the expense of on the backs of the American taxpayer. And if you look around at what's going on with energy, like wind turbines, industrial wind turbines, they're over in Europe, they're shutting them down. They're stopping building them out in the ocean. They're going, nope, that project's dead. We're not doing that. We've lost a lot of money, so on and so forth. But yet, they have gotten rich. We have in our state here, we've spent billions of dollars in tax credits, and frankly, it's a farce. It's just a crock of bull.
Well, it's
And
economically not feasible. We see that. The
no, it
concepts
is
don't
not.
work. We just
And
saw an
what it,
article talking about earlier in Asheville, North Carolina, like 2/3 of the electric buses haven't run or don't work. They haven't
right.
run in years, always falling apart. Um, it's crazy the amount of money they spend on this stuff, and then the stuff doesn't even work.
Yes, so thankfully, there's a growing chorus of climate scientists. They're saying the temperature readings are faulty and that the trillions of dollars pouring in are based on a problem that doesn't exist. Even though last year, NOAA said that 2023 was the warmest year in the 174-year climate record. I say bullshit. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that on the air, but I'm sorry. It just came out. You know,
She's getting
BS.
passionate. She's getting passionate here. I
Yeah.
like it.
Well, this is as scientists, some not scientists, but some people say, give me what kind of data do you want, and I'll give you that data. Right? You can fudge the numbers for whatever you want. And they're saying, oh, there's way more fires. Well, yeah, you know what? When you don't manage the forest, you get more fires. When you have a governor who refuses to put the fires out, they grow larger.
Or when
You
you
know,
set
we're,
them. Or when you set them.
yes. And then you have many more arsonists, I mean, and they just don't do anything about that. So I'm so happy to see that there are more true climate scientists that are going, you know what? This is a load of bull. And I have been reading more and more stories, and I am so glad about that. So more than 90%, this is from this article, more than 90% of the NOAA's temperature monitoring stations have a heat bias. According to Anthony Watts, a meteorologist, senior fellow for environment and climate at the Heartland Institute, author of climate website, What's Up With That, and director of a study that examined NOAA's climate stations. And with that large number, he says the methods that NOAA employs to try to reduce this doesn't work because the bias is so overwhelming. Well, let me tell you, it's we've talked about this on the air, Don, that we have eliminated and reduced so much pollution in America. That is a good thing. But what we're doing energy wise to energy rates are doubling for people, and energy is becoming less less reliable, less affordable, and yet we're paying so much taxes for this baloney. And it's just nice to see that we are getting some people that are standing up. And I know that there were people standing up years and years ago but they were shut down, they were defunded. But today there's more and more that have the cojones, to
Well,
speak out, to speak the truth about this. And so, and I'm glad that we're getting more what I do believe is truth. So,
yeah.
so
Well,
there's another meteorologist, Roy Spencer. He agreed. He said the surface thermometer data still have spurious warming effects due to the urban heat island, and heat islands are cities.
mhm,
When you go out in the country, when you pave and concrete vast areas,
mhm,
and you build tall buildings and restrict the airflow, you just create these huge heat islands. And when you're devoid of landscaping, devoid of trees and bushes, shrubs that will help create shade and cool areas, you
mhm,
are going to have hot areas. That stands to reason, right?
yeah.
But when you are putting in faulted data to, he says that this Mr. Spencer, he says that computerized climate models used to drive changes in energy policy are even more faulty. And that's it. When you're just going, well, this is the computer model we have. If you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out.
Well, at the end of the day, this goes back to I'll go back to that Adam Smith quote about it takes a moral people to have a constitutional republic. This is another example of that. Gone are the days of scientists who are dispassionate reviewers of data that you
Yeah.
would use in order to form a conclusion. These people have a conclusion and they're going to make the data fit the conclusion they want to reach. That's what we have. And almost every institution is loaded with people like this now. I mean,
Yeah.
you just can't trust them anymore. And NOAA is just another one, just like the CDC, just like the FDA, just like the SEC, just like the FBI. Goodness knows, just like the CIA,
Mhm.
no one trusts them anymore.
No, but I tell you, NOAA provides awesome data. When we were living on a sailboat, I relied on NOAA for
Hmm.
weather predictions, what the weather maps they produce.
Hmm.
You can look up the 100 years of hurricane tracking, their intensity. There's so much information going on NOAA website. You can, everything that NOAA produces is free. It's open to the public and it's free of charge because we've already paid for it,
Hmm.
taxpayer money. On their website, they have satellite pictures for all over the world. When we were sailing, some places we didn't have charts. So, by gosh, I would go download an aerial of some atoll that we're headed to, so we could see where the entrance was and what. So, they provide, I'm not saying all their stuff is bunk. I'm not saying that at all. But when they are pushing the climate narrative of this, that is bunk. NOAA
Well,
itself does a tremendous service to the United States and the world, quite frankly,
well, sure,
especially when
yeah.
it comes to climate weather maps, and then where hurricanes and the all of that tracking in the weather department, they have got it. That's really good. But yet when they do computer modeling for where a hurricane is going to go, they don't just rely on their own models. There's like four different models that are used from around the world, and they compare them all, and they say, okay, of these four, three of them kind of agree where it's going to go. All right, that's the one. That's probably it. When you got one out of four, no, that's not where it's gonna. That's not where something's gonna happen.
No.
And so I don't want to just bash Noah, but there
Well,
there
sure, it's like there's
definitely
certain
is.
yeah,
What,
there's certain
Don?
topics where they just want to politicize certain topics. I mean, you take a look at NPR, for example. I used to listen to NPR on the radio when I used to drive a lot, and there were some topics where they were very good. I mean, then there were some topics where you knew where it was going to go, and you knew they were going to sell you on a bunch of leftist garbage. So I don't wholly what do you call it bash NPR, if you will, so, except to say that that's the sort of thing that shouldn't be public anyway. I think private that should not be government paid for. But yeah, same kind of a thing. I mean, look, Hitler wasn't lying all the time.
Right? Right. And so here you have their faulty temperature readings in the exhaust fans of air conditioning units, surrounded
Mhm.
by asphalt parking lots and roads. I mean, why would you ever put a sensor there? That makes no sense. You're going to stick it up in the sky on the top of the building. You know, when you want to know what the temperature, the wind temperature, and the rainfall, you're putting it out in a clear in an open area, right? So it
Well,
can get all of those elements pretty cleanly.
it makes sense if you're trying to sell a certain position.
Yes, yes. So I'm really glad that Anthony Watts did this research on his own. And well, maybe he did it with others as well. But you know what? Let's go take a look at what really is going on. So kudos to him. And, you know, you just have to take a lot of things with a grain of salt.
Mhm.
But the next one, you're not going to have to take with a grain of salt, let me tell you. This switching gears, the FDA has quietly eliminated the informed consent requirements for medical experimentation. And actually, that goes against the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention says, is it Geneva? I think it is Geneva, that says that there has to be informed consent, and we're not going to do medical experiments on people.
So this means that without your permission, they can give you a drug that that they don't have well good data on, if you will, or not even tell you, basically.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And so before, what it has, the association, um, you know, not too long ago, my husband was at a doctor and they said, and now I guess it's been a couple years ago. And the doctor said, "Oh, I want you to have a flu shot." My husband's going, "Well, maybe I will." And he says, "Okay, I'm going to get you the consent form."
Mhm.
And on that consent form, this is just your flu shot. You know, it
Mhm.
says, you know, the number, it has these things. These are what could be possible things you have. And my husband, you had to check the box that you read it. You know, my husband did number one, number two, number three was Guillain-Barré. And when
Mhm.
my husband read Guillain-Barré, he goes, "Oh yeah, now I remember why I don't get flu shots. I'm not willing to get Guillain-Barré." You
Yeah.
know, that is informed consent.
Mhm.
And so now the FDA has said, um, so just to put it in layman's, you know, what I just described, patients have the right to receive information and ask questions about recommended treatments so that they can make well considered decisions about care. Successful communication in the patient physician relationship fosters trust and supports sharing making decisions. This is from the American Medical Association, okay, as it is now.
Mhm.
The process of informed consent occurs when communication between a patient and physician results in the patient's authorization or agreement to undergo a specific medical intervention.
Mhm.
That's it.
Okay.
And now it says the Food and Drug Administration uh, is issuing a final rule to amend its regulations to implement provisions, implement a provision of the 21st Century Cures Act, CURES, Cures Act. This final rule allows an exception from the requirement to obtain informed consent when a clinical investigation poses no more than minimal risk to the human subject. How do you like being called a human subject?
Well, at least they did say you were human.
Yes.
The question to
Okay.
ask me here, so why now? So why do we want to make why do they want to make that
So
change?
let me finish reading this and then we'll have this discussion. And includes appropriate safeguards to protect the rights, safety, and welfare of human subjects. The final rule permits an institutional review board to waive or alter certain informed consent elements or to waive the requirement to obtain informed consent under limited conditions for certain FDA-regulated minimal risk clinical investigations. Wow.
Yeah, again, it's like, why? What's who is benefiting from that, and why would you need to do that? What would why we want to make that change now? That's just my curiosity. I mean, I know the objective, is what to protect. Is this to protect the patient, or is it to protect the pharmaceutical companies?
Right. And so I recommend everybody to read this article from PJ Media. It said, outdated and irrelevant informed consent would apply, for instance, to the myocarditis draft alert that the CDC disregarded in May of 2021, while it was pushing the safe and effective lie on the public for the benefit of Pfizer, Moderna, and stakeholders within the public health bureaucracy. Via the Epic Times, which broke this story, the CDC sends alerts to federal, state, and local public health officials and doctors across the nation through a system called the Health Alert Network. Messaging through the systems convey vital health information. In May of 2021, the CDC officials drafted an alert for myocarditis and the two most widely used COVID-19 shots, according to the newly obtained document, which is being made public for the first time by the Epic Times. And this is the most recent draft of an alert, as discussed. Happy to discuss Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, the CDC's top official for equity in CDC 19 data and engagement, told two other high-ranking CDC colleagues in the email. And so, but this is what, so CDC officials drafted this, an alert, and the FDA ignored it. They ignored it.
Yeah.
And now they're saying we don't have to do, you don't have to have informed consent for medical experimentation.
People are just
when they did the emergency use authorization, that was exactly a medical experiment.
Mhm. Yeah.
You can't tell me it wasn't.
Yeah. So people have no trust. I mean, the trust in that system will continue to collapse for reasons like this.
No, and so wanted to bring that to light here on Captive Audience, because it is, in fact, I spoke with somebody recently that believes they were having surgery and got the shot under anesthesia and was given that.
Yeah.
They
Without their
believe it.
permission.
And I said, get your records, every single record there is, because it will be in there. Yes, without their permission.
It's kind of scary, and we've all heard of those cases.
That's damn scary to me.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't want to have it,
Mhm.
why would they do that?
Yeah. Well, you have
That's
people
unethical.
who are, they're politically aligned, and I'm going to do this because I want to do it. I mean, individuals making those kinds of decisions. We've heard of those cases where people decide that, well, this person's taking too many resources, so you have the nurse that decides, I'm going to go ahead and help this guy leave the world sooner than he might leave it. I mean, those things happen.
Yeah. I recently, anyway, these things are important to know, important to talk about, and be aware of. And that's why, I wanted to bring this about the FDA quietly eliminates informed consent requirements for medical experimentation. Why are they doing it quietly?
Yeah, we don't want any public debate over that. And goodness knows it'd be very easy to slip under the radar right now, given every other disaster the administration's caused.
Yeah.
You can't keep track of them all.
Yeah.
You really can't. I don't know that it's quieted down one single day.
No, and then moving on, because let me tell you, we're covering some. I would just say kind of. There's another article here. Montana parents lose custody of daughter for opposing her gender transition.
Yeah,
And this
you can
is in a
hardly think of a
state
worse thing.
that has a
Yeah.
Republican governor.
Mhm.
That is alarming. Now, not all Republicans are good, okay? They're not all conservative necessarily. I
Mhm.
don't know this governor whatsoever. I don't know anything about him except he is a Republican. But here you have the Child Protective Services essentially. Um, so it became inflamed so it happened in Montana.
Mhm.
And the daughter was suffering from numerous mental health conditions, including a desire to engage in attention seeking behavior, which is normal for teens suffering from gender dysphoria. But when Jennifer told the CFS, and that's not her name, they're not using her real name, told the representative at a home investigation. So here comes the Child Protective Services for a home investigation that she had swallowed a toilet pole cleaner. She tried to kill herself. And it was because her parents, didn't want her to get hormone therapy, right? So
Mhm.
that she had ingested harmful substance, taken to the doctors. The doctors kept her in the hospital anyway. They found out she had not ingested harmful substances,
Mhm.
but the doctors kept her anyway. And notes taken by hospital staff say the hospital consistently mentions that Jennifer identifies as a male. That's how it started. She says,
Mhm.
"I want to be called a male, a him."
Mhm.
And the parents said, "You're not a him, you're a her." And there rise goes the rub. The
Mhm.
hospital says, "Oh my gosh, we got to get, you know, the this is the label police."
So the staff turns it over to children's services at
Yes.
the hospital. How can you
And so
trust these
she was admitted to the hospital on threats
people?
to kill herself. The
Mhm.
hospital and state didn't do anything wrong in that respect.
Mhm.
But after more than just a cursory exam, they began to transition Jennifer to the male gender. And the mom says, "I came one day and she was talking about having top surgery and being non-binary." And it is when this is a this is a child with a
Well, it's a
mental
mental
health
disorder.
issue,
Yeah, there's
mental
no
health
other way to put it.
crisis, quite frankly.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
and it is the parents' duty to help them with that.
Mhm. But see, this is the underlying problem here is Marxists think that that you human beings belong to the state. They think the children belong to the state, and they demonstrate that with cases like this. We're to take your kid from you, and we do what we want with them. And this is to be fought with every tooth and nail that we can.
And so they were told that they were going to send their daughter from Montana to Wyoming. After this story is heartbreaking, quite frankly, and because the hospital is going, okay, we'll help her transition, and the doctors told them that there is 6 facilities in Montana and there's a facility in Wyoming, but we're going to keep her in Montana. But actually, it looked like um, they said that Montana authorities assured the parents that she would be placed in a Montana facility, but hours later they were told that the girl was sent to Wyoming, being sent to Wyoming because they had a bed that opened up in Wyoming. And this is about transitioning
Without their permission, of course.
without their consent, without their permission. This is Child Protective Services.
Wow. Well, this is obviously going to result in a major lawsuit. But
My
the
heart
whole
goes
thing.
out to these parents.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine getting drugged through that. But again, this is what Marxism is all about. You're to destroy the family is a fundamental tenet. And what better way to do it than by basically introducing a social contagion into the family, which is exactly what they've done with this bi trans madness. Who ever heard of this stuff 10 years ago, even? You know, diseases and mental disorders like this, they take decades, hundreds of years to develop. We go from like 0.001% having this stuff 20 years ago to like 25% of them reporting this as an issue.
When you get
Man,
indoctrination in the school,
yeah.
you get an indoctrination in the school
Hmm.
about this, starting very, very young.
Hmm.
And, so here was a hospital doing an intervention on a kid where this truly was not child abuse, you
But
know?
and see, here's as bad as this sounds, but here's the good news associated with that. This is a giant wake up call from a monster loudspeaker to the citizens of those two states that they got to put the kibosh to that because that could happen to any one of their kids or grandchildren. That
Yeah.
can happen to any, and I think it will. This is another one of those areas where I think the radical left has overstepped itself. Um, had they just been able to not have a goal of destroying the world by 2030 and pushed it back 10 years, they might have been able to quietly slide this sort of thing in. Um, let enough of that generation that's still ahead of them die off, if you will. Get another decade or two of people indoctrinated in the communist public school system, and then they could get this done. But I
Yeah.
think their hubris has gotten a hold of them, and they've reached for the finish line before they got there. They've leaned about 10 yards ahead of the tape, and I think things like this are really waking people up. Who would vote for this? I mean, there's a small percentage of the population that's crazy, no question
Yeah.
about it. There's about 20% that have lost their minds, but the rest of the population does not want this. And when it starts
Mm.
impacting them personally, similar to what's happened in these leftist cities that didn't want police, now their cities are completely overrun. They don't have grocery stores. They don't have any of that stuff. Similar to cities that were cool with sanctuary cities, and now their schools are overrun, destroyed, and there's tents all over the place. You get hit in the face with it, you start changing how you vote. And I think this is another one of those examples.
Well, I think it is. I think it is. My heart goes out to their daughter and to the parents, because the
Oh,
daughter is suffering some mental health issues and needs to have counseling, and needs to have the love and support of the parents, not an agency, and not somebody a healthcare center. I can't even call it that. A group, that wants to do that. It's a shame, and I do think it's helping to wake up more people. But this
oh,
is
but
the
for the kid,
suffering in the meantime.
well, for the kid that goes through that, I mean,
Oh
you
yeah,
imagine what happens when that person wakes up when they're 30 or 25 and realized I should have done that and it's not reversible.
yeah.
And you have
If
no
you've
family
watched
structure.
any of the blogs from the people that have detransitioned,
Mhm.
it's really eye opening.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to figure the life expectancy has been just whacked, and there's no way that you can live as long as you would have with all of the chemicals and stuff they have to give you.
Yeah, and the
I
brain
just
development.
right, all
You
of
know,
that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Definitely worse than tattoos, Pat. He says worse than tattoos. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's definitely
I
worse
used
than
to think
tattoos.
I used to
Or
think tattoos were bad. Get all the
they
tattoos you
quit
want,
piercing out.
just don't shop anything. Here, have a can of spray paint.
Oh my gosh, right? Please go do some graffiti. Get it out of
Yeah.
your system. I don't know. Do you have something else, Don?
Well, the one thing I don't think we can leave this evening without talking about what's happening on the border with Texas. I honestly think that might be the most monumental event since the firing on Fort Sumter. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that. You have a state finally saying, actually 25 of them, because 25 other governors
That's
have
right.
declared the willingness to send their national guards, because really it's not just Texas' border, it's all of our borders. This is an invasion that's happening everywhere. It's just that Texas happens to be on the front line. And the states, just like before the Civil War, are saying, hey, we have a right here. If the federal government's not going to defend the border, we have a right to defend our own border. And
Yeah.
the Biden position's indefensible. There is no way they can get around that. They're not doing. They're actually chopping down the wire that that state people are putting up, and then threatening the states with the federalization of the National Guards. Now, a lot of commentators are thinking that he won't have the stones to do that. I wouldn't put it past him. I think where the rub will be, and I hear no one talking about this, is will the state National Guards say no? No one's asking that. I suspect a huge number of them are going to say nope. You hear people, I listen to a Democrat talking about they sworn an oath, and all this stuff. Yeah, but what people don't realize about that oath, the oath is to the Constitution of the United States. It's not to the president, or it's not to a governor. And if that person is not defending the Constitution, you have a right as an officer to say no,
Right.
not doing
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've destroyed enough of the National Guard, my guess, for them to turn around and destroy their own mothers and fathers, aunts, uncles and aunts, friends and relatives. I don't think they have that yet.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And but I'll tell you, and so you realize it's 26 states. It's not just 25 because it's Texas plus 25. It's
That's true.
26 states that are fighting this. So that is the majority. We have 50, so it's the majority plus, plus one. And and this is a big deal. And quite frankly, it's hard to watch that the Democrats truly want to destroy this nation at any cost,
No,
right?
and you hate to think this, but maybe that's what they want. At the end, is they want a civil war. This circles back to my old philosophy from before, or not philosophy, but their thought process is: if we can come up with a reason to suspend the election and postpone the inevitable, which would be a loss for Biden. I don't know. It's just another theory, right?
Yeah.
But do they take that risk? Because if you do that, um, and the American people, by and large, are behind this. Everybody knows this immigration thing is a disaster. I don't care what party you're in.
Yeah, it is a disaster, and I'm very proud of the governors. I think there's about 6 governors I read today that have
Mhm,
sent some National Guard troops down to Texas to help Texas,
mhm,
and I just commend them for doing that. I think it was 6. I had read an article. Well, Governor Abbott is out of the country right now, and
mhm,
I can't remember where he went, but he's out of the country, and he was speaking there, and he had said, I've got like 6 governors that have sent, some National Guard troops,
mhm,
down to Texas to help us out.
mhm.
And what is good is Texas is not breaking the law in what they're doing. They're not going against what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme
Yeah.
Court only said the Border Patrol has the right to cut some razor wire. And I love what the Attorney General of Texas is saying, that you don't have the right to come on that particular land because it's state owned land.
Mhm.
It's a state park. It's not
Right.
federal property. The
Mhm,
feds can't come on state land. They can
mhm.
only go to federal land without an invite.
Yeah.
So it's we're going to have to see and watch and what's happening there. But I'll tell you what it's we're in some tumultuous times in more than one
Mhm.
space. That's for
Oh,
sure.
in multiple fronts, but that one is absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad that this governor has stood up to them. It
Me
needed to
too.
happen.
Me too.
It just needed to happen. And now there's a spotlight on it. I mean, everybody can see. There's no getting around it. You have a president. I hate to call him that because he wasn't
Oh,
elected.
right.
But we have the whoever you want to call them, who is unwilling to defend the border, and everybody is suffering because of it. There's no getting around it.
And so, but one of my thoughts is that how come this wasn't last year?
I I don't know.
Is this all political theater now? I don't know. I don't know, truthfully.
That
I'm
could be,
I'm
that could
glad
be.
that it's happening, but I do wonder if it's political theater. I don't know.
There's
Um,
probably a certain amount
those
of that. The
thoughts cross
timing,
my mind, so I'm just
yeah.
sharing with you my thoughts.
No, I
I
wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. The timing is certainly a part of it. But then the other, you could also argue that you got to check all of these boxes. You tried all of these things,
right,
and
right.
you could make, and maybe both are true at the same time.
Yeah, because it's not like he hasn't done anything, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
because he has tried. He put the barriers down the middle of the river. He's
Hmm.
put up razor wire, put up containers with razor
Hmm.
wire. He's
Hmm.
starting to build his own fence,
Hmm.
and we'll just help
Yeah.
build that wall.
Hmm.
And so there's been a lot of things done, and I guess maybe it isn't political theater. I don't know.
But yeah,
I just
I think
kind of
it's yeah. I think it's possible for it to be both at the same time. What I'm kind of curious about is what's going through the heads of the Democrat governors. And I'm not sure if those 26 governors, is that all the Republican governors? That'd be an interesting question. And number
yeah.
two, those Democratic governors, they're not against this. They are, but they're not politically positioned to join it. And that's too bad. I mean, it'd be the morally correct thing to do, but they can't possibly like that this is happening because this clearly hurts them.
Well, it does. I mean, you're hearing from the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City going, "We can't take this anymore," you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah,
And
right.
so,
Yeah, but they don't.
but
They
you
don't
see,
dare.
the Democrat political machine won't allow them
Yeah,
to
they don't
stand
dare.
up.
They don't dare buck their established system or however their pockets are lined. The same
Exactly.
with cities like Chicago and places like that. They're not. And heaven help us. We know California, Oregon, and Washington are going to fall in line, even though California is a border state.
Yeah. It
So
is. It is. And because of how many people have come across, we're all border states,
yeah.
truthfully, or it's anyway. I'm glad he shipped them to so other states feel that effect. Hey, I've got one good news. Don, you and I have been on for 1 hour. Of course, we were 2 minutes late, so
Wow.
almost 58 minutes now.
How does that
But
happen?
well, we were covering some what I'll say things that are very important to bring out to people's attention.
Yes.
It's not just the news as news goes, right?
Mhm.
I believe that's what you and I are trying to do here, and all of us here at Captive Audience. But the good news is the Equity and Inclusion Office in Clackamas County has been eliminated.
Yes, that is
Yes.
awesome.
I mean, it's like it almost doesn't get any better than that. And I'm going, in fact, when I saw that on social media yesterday, I posted it and I think I reposted it and I said, "When's Umatilla County? Do they have DEI? Does Umatilla County have DEI? Can we please eliminate it if we do?"
Now
And
that's
it
great
was
news.
so the Equity and Inclusion Office was created back in July of 2020. And this comes months after the county commissioners debated getting rid of the office. And I commend them. Hats off to Clackamas County
They, they did
for
it.
getting rid of that. And,
It's possible.
everything should be not on it. Everything needs to be merit based.
Mhm. Right, right. Well,
It
there's no
is.
other way. This is no other way. And, and you look, and it's funny too when you look at the way the Supreme Court decisions have gone recently with regard to affirmative actions in schools. They've gone away from that stuff, and then they have DEI pop up. It's like, where in the world did this come from, and why? But we know the why. That's no. We could talk about that for another 20 minutes. So I won't. I won't go there.
So, well, let me say It says it will no longer operate as a standalone department
Mhm.
effective February 5th. So
So it'll
they're
stay
going to get
alone.
those 2 employees. It had 2 full-time employees there are going to get transferred to 2 other departments.
So they can spread their diseases there.
And I hope I hope I hope all of that goes away, and I hope Clackamas County goes to merit-based and all of that. So,
Well, just keep them out of the airline industry.
oh man, boy, the airline industry. Now there's another one.
I know, but I know we'll talk about that one next week.
Okay, okay. All right. Hey, thank you so much, Don. And thank you, everybody, for sticking with us. We know this was a long show tonight. We had a little bit of a late start. And so just spread the message and just thank you so much for staying with us.
Great to see you all as always. Take care now.